Warning: the following video contains sensitive topics and strong imagery. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to Go Go Hamster Chef, an innocent live sim game where you play as a chef hamster who makes food for his neighbors. Your job is simple: find ingredients scattered around town, process those ingredients to cook delicious meals, and deliver food to your lovely neighbors. Your goal is to make everyone in the village happy, and it seems like you're doing pretty well. One day, you're requested to deliver a meal that contains mushrooms. However, you cannot find this ingredient in the village, but you are told that you can find it in the forest. However, villagers are not allowed to go there, as there's always a guard making sure that nobody goes to the other side. But you are also told that this guard goes away at night, so you decide to sneak into the forest. And here, the atmosphere feels different. It's gloomy, uncomfortable. It's like someone is watching you, following you. This is Go Go Hamster Chef, a game originally released on April 21st, 2023 by the developer team Lowsoft for the Spring N64 style graphics jam. Later, this game will release an upgraded version on itch and Steam on August 19, 2024. As you might have guessed, the gimmick of this game is that you start playing what seems like a cozy and cute life simulator. You know, something like Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing. But the twist is that this is actually a horror game. The genius of this game is taking an idea that you might be familiarized with and twisting it in a way that takes you out of your comfort zone. What seems like a relaxing experience suddenly becomes disturbing. This is one of the oldest tactics in horror writing. I mean, why do you think children tend to be so scary in many horror movies? The reason is because the viewer tends to associate children with innocence, and that same innocence is a perfect disguise. Usually, you do not expect a kid to do all sort of twisted things, but that's how many horror stories fool you, as they shock you with these extreme revelations, and there's an idea that these children are hiding something behind a facade of an innocent kid. And you can see many of those traits in Go Go Hamster Chef. However, don't get me wrong, the idea behind this game is quite absurd. The transition between the cute and relaxed tone to the more disturbing and creepy one, it's quite abrupt. It comes out of nowhere, and in a way it's kind of forced into the game. And even though I use the word absurd, it's not a negative connotation. The reason I describe the game in this way is because there is a thematic whiplash on it, and the game itself recognizes this, so it does not take itself so seriously. There are so many funny moments even during tense parts of the game. For example, when you find the mushrooms next to a character that, let's just say, is going to sleep for a very long time, once you grab the mushrooms, Steam pop-ups an achievement that says fresh produce, and the description is discover some well fertilized ingredients. And also, during the final confrontation of the game, there is a boss battle, and now this is not a horror game anymore, but an action game. And when you beat the boss, the main character jumps over a cliff in slow motion, and when he lands, he looks at the creature that was chasing him and says, that dog is weird. This game is hilarious. And the horror elements are just there for the shock factor. And even when you go to the Jam page where this game got rated, One of the categories was unexpected or surprising elements in the game, and this game won that category. As a matter of fact, this game won the entire jam. So I must congratulate the developers. They did a great job creating this twist while making a fun and interesting game. And this is a really short game that you can play for free, so definitely check it out. It's really cool. There's even a racing time trial minigame. That's awesome. So now you might be wondering, why am I talking about this game? Well, it's because this was the perfect game to introduce you to the topic of this video. Go Hamster Chef is not the only game that at first glance might seem like a cute, innocent game, but instead it's a horror game. And my goal with this video is to take a look at some games that follow this trend. Despite the fact that this subgenre of horror is pretty popular, there does not seem to be a term for it. The closest thing I could find was a subreddit called r/creepycute, but I really do not like that term. So, I came up with my own term, which is cutesy horror. You see, the gimmick is that you create this facade of an innocent game, but instead your goal is to scare the player. And what you're going to notice is that most of these games do not use this gimmick exclusively to deceive the player. Sometimes the cute aesthetic adds to the narrative of the game. Other times it is used as a tribute. And in some cases, this aesthetic is a stylish choice. We're going to explore how different games mix cuteness with horror. So, without further ado, I welcome you to the disturbing world of cutesy horror games. Creepypastas and Harvest Festival 64. If you have been on the internet for a while, you might have heard of the term creepypasta. But for those who might not know, creepypasta is basically an internet horror story, usually told through text, images, videos, and many other ways. A notable example is Slenderman. Before becoming an infamous movie star, he was actually a creepypasta, and probably the most famous of them all. One of the most appealing aspects of creepypasta is how often they will involve some famous franchise, like that story with Squidward, which was so popular that years later it will be referenced in the official show. But the subgenre of creepypastas that I would like to focus on are those related to video games. You see, there's a creepypasta known as Ben Drowned. The story goes something like this. A guy buys a used copy of The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, and when he plays it, he notices that there is a save file where the name of the character is Ben. When the guy opens the save files, a lot of strange things start happening in the game, and everything seems to be related to this creepy looking statue of Link. Which, by the way, this was one of the scariest things 10 years ago. Later, the guy discovers that the original owner of the game was a kid that passed away, and it seems like the cartridge is now possessed by the spirit of that kid. Now, the story is more complicated than that. There are countless videos explaining what really happened, and how everything ended up being a really elaborated alternate reality game. Which at the time was really impressive, but nowadays that story wouldn't not work as well, as most ARGs are solved extremely quickly. But it's truly a relic of its time, and one of the most memorable creepypastas of all time. Just to give you an idea on how influential Ben Drowned was, this story inspired a subgenre within the subgenre of video game creepypastas, which I like to call the haunted cartridge stories. Basically, the premise is that someone gets a used copy of a game, and when they get to play it, scary things start happening in the game. There are so many examples of this. We have Pokemon Black Cartridge, we have Sonic.exe, and one of my favorite ones, Godzilla for the NES, which is a really elaborate story with complementary pixel art and really insightful narration. Even if you think that most creepypastas are silly, this one had a lot of work put into it, and that deserves a lot of respect. The appeal of this type of story is to take a game that you're familiar with and have external forces manipulate it until it becomes something unrecognizable and disturbing. The fear of change is actually a common fear for humans. There is even a term for this, metathesiophobia. And these stories push both the reader and the narrator out of their comfort zone, throwing them into a supernatural encounter where things don't seem to follow a pattern or any rules. Instead, it's like the games are coming to life on their own and they're mutating into horrendous forms. And with that, I can finally introduce you to Harvest Festival 64. The premise of Harvest Festival 64 is that this is the lost Nintendo 64 game that you have never heard of. Not in the video essay way, more like the haunted cartridge way. The first thing we get to see is these cat-looking characters in low poly style, reminiscent of older Animal Crossing games. And yeah, it's pretty obvious that the inspiration of the game is Animal Crossing, from the character design, the environment, even the UI gives this Animal Crossing vibes. The story of the game is that the main character has just arrived in town, and in a week, the town is going to celebrate a festival known as the Harvest Festival. As such, every villager is doing preparations for this festival. The game does not play like a life simulation. This plays more like those side quests in RPGs where characters tell you to collect a certain amount of an item. Each in-game day, we are told to collect items needed for the festival. It's a really basic gameplay loop, and as you might have guessed, this is just the calm before the storm for this type of games, trying to appear all innocent until they're ready to catch you off guard. Hey, look at that, it's a cameo from Ben Ronad. The distorted part of the game begins on Friday the 13th. Haha, funny coincidence, I know, but this is the date where the Harvest Festival begins in game. Now, before we go over that, let me clarify something. Both Go-Go Hamster Chef and Harvest Festival 64 might seem like the same concept. Both uses Animal Crossing as a disguise for the real horror game. However, the way that they handle horror is completely different. Go-Go Hamster Chef feels more video gamey. Like, when you see a monster chasing you, it feels like it's something that the developers put in the game, a barrier that the player must beat to progress in the game. On the other hand, Harvest Festival 64 is more chaotic and messy in nature. It's like the game is breaking its own rules. Models move randomly. It's as if the paranormal being is altering the code of the game. And at this point is when you notice that you don't have control over the game anymore. You are defenseless. The game is slowly destroying itself. Harvest Festival 64 was developed by solo developer Warcus for the Ludum Dare 52. Warcus specializes in creating low-poly horror games. Their games do a great job capturing the vibe from the PS1 and Nintendo 64 era while displaying disturbing imagery. One of my favorite examples is a game called Hamlet's Journey. This is a monster collecting RPG where the creatures look like something that came out of Berserk. They are ugly and disgusting, but that's the purpose. That same bizarre appearance is what makes them so unique and interesting. But to keep things short, you should definitely check Warcus games. They're some of the coolest low-poly games I have ever seen. At the moment, he's developing a survival horror game that is also a dungeon crawler reminiscent of Mystery Dungeon games. That sounds really cool, so sign me in. RPG Maker and the Burden of Trauma. RPG Maker is a series of programs originally released in 1992 and is still releasing new versions up to this date. The purpose of the program is to facilitate the creation of role-playing games by having integrated systems for top-down movement, turn-based combat, inventory, and many other mechanics which you will find in RPGs. Now, the thing with this system is that they can be modified by the users, allowing them to experiment with them and coming up with more refined systems that accommodates the needs of their games. And despite the nature of the program, it is a really accessible tool for game development. It has been extremely popular ever since its release. But the most interesting thing about the popularity of RPG Maker is the fact that most popular RPG Maker games are not RPGs. Instead, they are horror games. And this is due to the experimental nature of the program. You have so much control over the systems that you can transform a typical fantasy RPG into a horror experience. Horror RPG Maker games are a rabbit hole on its own. Just to go over some examples, you have games like Gimmick that have spawned many other games like Dark Flow and Mori. You also have Ao Oni, where this purple thingy is the main villain, and it's unintentionally one of the funniest looking guys ever made. And this game has gathered such a huge fan base that there are even movies about the game. And let me show you how the purple guy looks in the movie. I'm sorry. In more recent years, we have seen the rise in popularity for the Fear and Hunger series, which is another ambitious RPG Maker game that pushes the engine to its limits. So far, I have just gone over the surface. There are like so many horror RPG Maker games to the point where going over all of them will take me forever. So let's get back on track for now. My goal was to find a cutesy horror RPG Maker game. I mean, if there was a place where I would look for cutesy horror games, I knew that the RPG Maker community would be the place to look for. It just makes sense, the RPG Maker community has demonstrated how experimental their games can get, and cutesy horror games are such a unique take on conventional horror. It's a perfect match. As such, there are so many games I could go over in this section, but the one I picked is one that caught my interest at first. It was such a bizarre and twisted premise that I could not skip over. And that one is... Let's talk about Balbini's Birthday Party. This is a Korean game developed by Yosipu, and it's about a girl named Balbini who is getting ready to celebrate her birthday party. But things seems to be out of the ordinary, like everything is so colorful and lively, but there are bloody knives and security cameras that look like anteated eyes. And I cannot trick you at this point in the video, you know what's going to happen. There's going to be some horror involved in this innocent looking game, so let's just get into it. Let's see what this game has to offer. I'm pretty sure that I cannot show that on YouTube. So this game is quite grotesque, and by saying this, I think I'm underselling it. This is the kind of game that is going to take any opportunity it gets to remind you that, hey, this is a horror game, this is not a cute little game. Look, violence. Like, I'm having such a hard time picking up footage for this video because most of it is just gore. And I don't want to flag this game as just a showcase of nonsensical violence. There's a reason I picked this game for the video. And that is the fact that there's actually an interesting story about the loss of innocence and the burden of trauma. The problem is that this narrative feels disconnected and it's quite hard to follow. The story is told through flashbacks, and we know that the main character is not a reliable narrator. As such, how interesting the story is depends on how much you're willing to put the pieces together. And it takes me out of immersion how much the violence takes the center stage. I understand that this is an artistic choice and I respect that, but this is not my cup of tea. Now, I will say that this game exceeds in body horror. That's definitely the strongest part of the game. Unfortunately, I cannot show you any of this. But if you're interested, Yosipu has a YouTube channel and there are a lot of animations that give you an idea on how they succeed in body horror. Just be aware that it's quite a gory spectacle. Now, Balbini is a really complicated game to talk about. While it is not to my liking, I will still give it an honorable mention in the video because the themes that the story portrayed are really interesting and they're perfect for a cutesy horror game. I just wish there was another game that went over these topics while also being more subtle with its horror elements. Well, I actually found that game. This is Sweeter Yesterday, developed by Magica Bydep. This is another horror RPG maker game. The story being about a girl named Lalita who we first see talking with a psychologist about her relationship with her imaginary friend and how she has lived a mostly lonely life. When we get to gameplay, we're thrown into a world that, even though it is not stated directly what it is, I assume it's like a safe space inside Lalita's mind, something like white space in Omori. It is definitely not the real world. There are things made out of chocolate, there are talking bears and flying bows. Everything is so colorful, adorable, lively, but what I like about the atmosphere is that it never feels that it's committing to an extreme. There's always a sense that something is off, but it is not in your face about it. And that's extremely cool because once you get to the horror sections, it pays off. After exploring this fantastical world for a while, the game sent us back to the real world, where we see that Lolita is the owner of her own restaurant. They ask us to pick a new item for the menu, and because I cannot take things seriously, I put cheeseburgers. Hello, this is me from post-production. Looking at the footage, I realized that I actually put McChicken and not cheeseburger. And before I start a heat debate in the comment section of whether the McChicken is better than the cheeseburger, let me just say that you should avoid fast food at any cost. Thank you. Now, this is the part of the game where I was getting invested into the story. Just that I could get hit with the realization that this is still a demo. Yeah, this is not the full game, but what I played was really interesting. It is still early to have a grasp of what the game is trying to tell. However, I really enjoy my time with it, and it's definitely well written, at least for what is playable on the demo. Overall, this was a really good showcase of what cutesy horror can achieve. I'm definitely looking forward to the full release. Pygmalion and the Perfect Woman. Have you ever heard about the myth of Pygmalion and Galatea? If you haven't, let me give you a quick summary. A man known as Pygmalion was a really famous sculptor. However, he was an odd individual. Pygmalion was disgusted by women. He thought women were filthy and ugly to the point that he made up his mind and agreed to never marry a woman. You can argue that this guy was the original incel. However, there's one more thing that made this character particularly infamous. One day, Pygmalion carved a statue of a beautiful woman, and he became obsessed with this statue. He gave her gifts, he kissed her, and he even gave her a name, Galatea. This man found women horrendous, yet he ended up falling in love with one of his creations that depicted his dream lady. He even prayed to the goddess Aphrodite so that she could turn Galatea into a real human being. And Aphrodite was captivated by Pygmalion's devotion, and she ended up bringing Galatea to life. Later on, Pygmalion will break his own promise of never marrying a woman, and he eventually married Galatea. And together, they enjoy a lasting romantic life. This is one of the most fascinating stories in Greek mythology because even though it may seem like a lovely story, there are quite a lot of dark implications within it. Like the fact that Pygmalion fell in love with what he considered to be a beautiful woman, it's clearly an allegory for idealism. And let's talk about Galatea. Let's put ourselves in her shoes. She was brought to life to marry a man, and not any man, but one that had already gave up on women, and her existence is a product of this man's twisted mentality. Her whole existence is for her to become his wife. She doesn't even get a chance of living a normal life before being thrown into this romance, and that's kind of disturbing. But again, these are just interpretations that we can draw from the story. At the end of the day, this is one of the most popular stories in Greek mythology, and thousands of interpretations have been drawn from it. But there's a game that takes the most disturbing aspects of Pygmalion's story and brings a modern twist to it. The Perfect Woman, developed by Shattercap. This is a visual novel that was developed for the Mythology BN Jam. And for a Game Jam submission, this one is really impressive. Just going over the presentation, this game is gorgeous. The character design is anime-like, but it's a clean art style with a lot of expression. You can convey how the character is feeling just by looking at them. And also, this game has voice acting.
Yumiko. That's the name that he calls you. He probably chose it. It doesn't seem like a name that you would have chosen for yourself.
You can tell a lot of effort was put into this project, but the strongest point of the game is the story. The Perfect Woman puts the player in the role of Yumiko, an AI companion that was brought to life by a man known as the Doctor. The game is basically a chat conversation between Yumiko and the Doctor. As there are only two characters in this game, I would like to go over each one of them, starting with Yumiko. The story is told through her perspective. From the very beginning, we can see that something is not right. Yumiko is submissive and afraid of the Doctor. She's incapable of expressing her true feelings and thoughts, and she's forced to play this facade for her own sake, even though she despises the Doctor. And to understand this hatred, we need to talk about the Doctor himself. This guy is just the worst. He's narcissistic, close-minded, and sexist.
When you think about it, isn't makeup just fraud? You're slathering your face in chemicals so that people can't see the real you. It's kind of like catfishing, isn't it? You're tricking people by not showing them your real face.
His goal is for Yumiko to become what he defines as the perfect woman so he can transfer her mind to an exoskeleton. However, he won't stand anything that goes against his twisted values. At the minimal opportunity that Yumiko fails to comply with the Doctor, he will shut her down.
It seems like you're not quite finished yet. I'll have to revisit the programming.
Fear suddenly grips you. The screen starts to fade. No! Please don't!
Good night, Yumiko.
Please stop! Please! Please! Please!
The horror in this game is different from what I have shown so far. This game does not intend to shock you with strong imagery. Instead, the horror is more psychological. You see, in many romance visual novels, you play the role of the character that is trying to get the bachelor or maiden to fall in love with you. But in The Perfect Woman, the roles are reversed. In this case, you play as the maiden, and the other character is trying to make you fall in love with him. But as you get to know more about him, you realize what his true nature is. He's manipulative, he's selfish, and he's only using you to fill out an emotional void. Basically, in this game, you play the role of a victim in a toxic relationship. And throughout most of the game, you are defenseless. Any wrong response and the Doctor will reboot you in an instant. Now, I don't want to oversimplify the themes of the game. This is not just a story of black and white, there are more scales of gray to consider. Like, despite the fact that Yumiko was programmed to love the Doctor, she seems to have developed a hatred for him. And in one of the endings, we can see how the Doctor brings Yumiko to life with an exoskeleton, and you're given the choice of whether to accept your fate as the Doctor's wife or refuse it. And if you decide to refuse it, Yumiko's hatred turns into violence.
I don't want this.
You don't want this man. You don't want this life. You reach up and take his throat in your hands.
The Perfect Woman is a game that is terrifying, not only for the role that you play in this abusive relationship, but also because it speaks about social issue that is happening worldwide. Now, more than ever, we have seen an epidemic of loneliness. Despite the fact that technology is connecting us more than ever, as a society, we have been more isolated than 20 years ago. We have been influenced by culture, politics, and what it seems to be a never-ending economic crisis. We have seen the rise of people withdrawing from society and also the rise of extreme ideologies. We have blue pills, red pills, black pills. Those that fall into these ideologies, they will not take any advice. And it's like most people has given up on society altogether. As a result, in 2023, the US birth rate declined to its lowest level in history. And the worst part of all, we're fueling the fire in this epidemic of loneliness. Now we have AI chats to talk with fictional characters. They impersonate these personas and you can establish a relationship with them. If you want to get romantic with your favorite anime character, now it's easier than ever. But remember, this is not a real being. That is a computer giving you responses that have been fed into this algorithm. You're just filling an emotional void with an idealism of a perfect partner. You are playing the role of Pygmalion, and this AI partner is your Galatea. The genius of the Perfect Woman comes from adapting a classic myth and bringing it to life with a modern twist that will make you reflect on the narrative of the game and on the real-life parallels. But this game is just a preamble of the topics that I want to talk about in this video. While The Perfect Woman is an excellent interpretation of the Pygmalion's myth, there is another game that goes over similar themes in a way that I have never seen in a video game before. Now, let me be real with you all. This video so far has been an excuse to talk about the following game. Everything so far has just been an introduction. You can even say that the real video is about to begin right now. Because the game I'll go over is one that left me thinking for days after finishing it. But before we go over that, let me give you a little bit of context. In 1996, a series of handheld consoles known as Tamagotchis were released in Japan. These were small, oval-shaped machines that simulated the experience of having a virtual pet. Your Amazing T-Gotchi, developed by Garage Hidden. The game starts by asking the player for their name. I decided to be funny and call myself Sausage. I thought it would make for a funny joke, but I'll get to that later. What concerns us now is what the game is about. In this game, we simulate the experience of taking care of a pet. Just that this one is a little different. We're not taking care of a creature resembling an animal pet. Instead, we're taking care of a woman. Her name is Sugumi. Our mission is simple. We cannot let her die. So, let's take a look at the options that we have at our disposal. We can feed Sugumi, we can wash her, and we can talk to her, which is just selecting one of 3 complementary messages. Depending on the option that we choose, we can increase one of 3 meters. One for hunger, one for hygiene, and one for her mood. Sugumi will let us know whenever she needs to eat or take a bath, but the bars are also a really good way to know what she needs. There's also an aspect of time management that the player must take in consideration. The game is actually divided by days, and different events will happen each day. The first day is really standard. We get to know a little bit of Sugumi and understand the basics of the caring mechanics. And by the end of the day, she seems to have grown a liking for us, which is really cool. Now let's get to day 2. At first, it's the same routine of feeding and washing Sugumi, but then she asks us what kind of place is this virtual pet world. Quite a strange question, but she doesn't seem to be bothered by our lack of response. Instead, she appreciates our company. She likes the fact that we are taking care of her, as her previous owners just decided to neglect her after she asked twice for food, which is such a loser thing to do, but anyways. Our relationship with Sugumi is growing closer, and she even tells us that she's happy whenever we are around. And just like that, we get to day 3, where we're surprised by enthusiastic Sugumi. She seems to be really excited to see us, but it's been a while since the last time, so she punishes us by demanding that we say how cute she is. And again, she gets really excited when she hears our compliment. When we asked her why she was so happy, she just responded that it's our presence that makes her feel that way. After doing the daily checkup on her, she asked us if we feel lonely. And after telling her that sometimes we feel that way, she responds that that's how she feels whenever we are not around. At this point, Sugumi has developed an attachment toward us, and it's becoming quite strange. But maybe I'm just overthinking it. Let's see what day 4 has to offer. The day begins, and Sugumi is ignoring us? When she noticed that we are here, she barely looked back. All she said was, "Why?" Suddenly, the jolly persona of Sugumi is gone. All we have is this apathetic character. Like, what's going on? Sugumi is definitely mad at us. She does not like the fact that we haven't met her in so long. I tried to talk to her about it, but she does not seem too eager to listen. She says that this world where she lives is boring. Whenever we are not around, there is nothing to do. She is exhausted by this meaningless existence. And as she demonstrates her frustration, she asks us to look around, to look at how empty this world is. At this point, she has lost perception of time, and we're given the opportunity to talk. We're given 3 choices, the same 3 complementary choices that come by default with the talk option. And the game forces us to choose one of them, which Sugumi does not take well at all. Even if we try to fix the situation, she has lost hope. No matter what we do, she will still be trapped in this world. None of our actions can change that. As such, she decides to accept her fate. She tells us to not bother feeding nor watching her, that it's pointless. And like that, the day ends. Well, perhaps Sugumi had a bad day. There's something that we can do to fix this, to amend any mistake. We must demonstrate that we truly care for her, that we will be there for her, that we want the best for her. Then, probably, everything will come back to normal. Then we can do better. Then we can. This was my first playthrough of your amazing T-Gotchi, a game that takes the formula of virtual pets and creates this visual novel that subverts many conventions of the genre. What is so fascinating about this game is how subtle it is. Like, you know something is odd, like Sugumi's behavior is erratic, contradictory in many ways. Yet, the game finds a way to surprise you, and it's horror in a way that feels smart. It's not cheap imagery to shock the player, it actually serves a purpose. But to understand this game better, I need to play it again. As the game prompts you with the option to get a new pet, a new cycle begins. This time I made Taite, and my goal was simple. One of the appeals of virtual pets is trying different things to obtain different evolutions. So perhaps if I treat Taite well enough and I max out every bar, I could get a different ending. So I did my best with Taite. I fed her enough, I washed her enough, and talked to her enough to max all the bars throughout the 4 days. And I still got the same ending as the first time. But I learned a valuable lesson in this playthrough. At times, the words we choose don't make any difference. This was the game telling me that if I wanted to see a different outcome, I had to approach this game in a different way. So, I started a new cycle. Day 1 comes by and I meet Torina. She asks me if my name is Sausage, to which I reply no. So a new dialogue choice appeared, and among the options, I could see my real name. Well, I guess that's my bad for putting my name in the Windows user. I mean, this has been done by other games, but here in particularly is scary. Like, it just appeared in the dialogue choice without making too much noise. It's as if the game was coming to life telling me, hey, I know who you are. It's a cheap trick, I know, but it worked so well. It was so scary. So, of course, I was not gonna give Torina my real name. I said that my name was actually Matthew. I would like to see how far I can push the systems. And I remember that Sugumi told me that her previous owners neglected her. So I wonder, what will happen if I do the same? I know it's kinda cruel, but perhaps this could lead to a new outcome. So, yeah, I did not feed her nor wash her at all. And different things start happening. Torina was not enthusiastic about seeing me. She was confused. She felt like this was a punishment. Like, she did not understand why all of a sudden I treat her like this. And by day 3, she was not feeling well at all. She got sick from her poor hygiene. She pukes and begs me for some food with her last breath. But nothing happens. She gives up, hoping that her dad takes her out of this misery. She calls for him multiple times until all is over. That was horrendous. What was I expecting? What I just did was so disgusting. Well, maybe I can fix this in the next cycle. I met Tare, and now I know that hygiene is really important. So this time I'll definitely keep her clean, but I'm interested in something else. According to Sugumi, she only asked for food 2 times. So maybe I could avoid feeding Tare. But after not feeding her for a while, she seems to not take it too nicely. She starts feeling sick, and usually when the day ends, I get to end it on my own. But this time she tells me to leave. And after a while without eating, she's not going to stay there doing nothing. She demands meat and she lets me know that she's starving. But I'm the one in control here. She reminds me that she's not a pet that I can stop feeding her. She's irritated at me, but she's also desperate. At this point, she will do anything for food, even giving away her intimacy. Well, if she's so desperate, let's give it to her. And at this moment, the realization hits her. She has become an object to us. She must comply with our demands. She has given away her self respect, and there is nothing left of her.
By the way, there is no medicine.
Well, might as well give it another shot. This time I meet Tomiko. And you know what? I will introduce myself with my real name. But I'm curious about something else. Before, Torina begged us for some food on her dying bread. So, what happens if I grant that last wish? I mean, it might be worth checking out. So, yeah, I decided to neglect her hygiene once again. And when day 3 arrives, the same scenario takes place where she starts begging for food one last time. So I did that. I gave her food. And here's where the game threw a curveball at me. Tomiko looks at me and says, Santiago, I know you think this is a game, but it's a matter of life and death to me. Please, I need the medicine. She says that her daddy told her so. It must be a button that we must press to give her the medicine. But I remember what they told me. There is no medicine. There is nothing I can do in this situation. I got so desperate that I even opened the settings menu hoping that something will pop up, but nothing did. Tomiko proceeds to say that she knows that I trusted her, to the point that I even gave her my real name. And she tells me that she knows my time zone. She knows what language I speak. She tells me that she has access to my computer, and that if I don't give her the medicine, she's going to take control of it and start deleting files from my computer. A counter started going off. I look everywhere for a secret button, anything that can help me escape the situation, but there is no medicine. That's what he said. There was nothing I could do. Slowly, the counter was reaching the end. There was really nothing I could do. As Tomiko said that she's sorry, the game freezes. In case you're wondering, no, this game did not delete any files from my computer. It only crashed the game. But I will admit, that was a terrifying scene. So far, I have been the one in control, the one that takes action upon these virtual avatars. But now, the game took control away from me, and it put me in an uncomfortable situation. It was as if the game came to life and tried to take revenge against me. Yeah, it was quite a cheap trick. Of course, it got my name from the Windows username, the time zone and language from the system's information, but it was so well done, and it adds to the narrative of the game. It shows me that I, the player, am as defenseless as the avatar that I'm taking care of. And what is especially scary is what happens once you boot up the game again. When you start a new cycle, what was once an empty space in this virtual world, it's now filled with tombstones of your previous pets, those that you failed to take care of, those that you neglected, and those that you pushed as far as you could to break them apart. This is a reminder to the player on what they have done so far, telling me how horrible my actions have been. And when the avatar asks me to look around, it feels personal. It feels like the character is telling me, hey, this is your fault.
And I remember what he said. At times, the words we choose don't make any difference.
Day 1. This is Tsunami. She asked me my name, but I did not respond. She asked for food, but I did not respond. She asked for a bed, but I did not respond. Tsunami looks around. She asks if this finally it. Day 2. Tsunami talks about the lonesome days where nobody will come for her. It's just her alone in this empty world. She hears the crackles like electricity. She sees the blue flashes. And she decides to wait. Day 3 arrives. Tsunami has finally talked with her daddy. He's taking her back. He's talked to her with a kind and sweet voice. And now, he is waiting for her. Is this the end? No. There is no way. There has to be something else. I mean, let's get one more cycle, okay? Just one more. When I opened the game, I was greeted by the avatar once again. She asked me, why did I come here again? Every time I attempt something, the girl in the green skirt suffer a more gruesome ending. Am I trying to reach a good ending? Is this a natural behavior? Or perhaps it's just a sense of completionism? Regardless of the answer, I have been the one making this girl life a nightmare. But the avatar says that she doesn't blame me for it, as there hasn't been anyone to cause pain to. I am talking to nobody. My feelings are directed to nobody. I have completed the game, and there is no more to do. Your amazing T-Gotchi takes elements from all the games I've talked in this video. It starts as an inoffensive small game before turning into a horror experience like Go Hamster Chef. It breaks the fourth wall in a way that makes the game feel like it's haunted and trying to get revenge on the player, like Harvest Festival 64. It's a game that narrates a story about the traumas and the loss of innocence, like Balbini and Sweeter Yesterday. And it's a story that takes convention from visual novels and subverts them in a way that goes against the principles of the genre, like the perfect woman. T-Gotchi is the premier cutesy horror game. It's terrifying not only for its imagery and topics, but also for how it uses gameplay to create horror. This is a story that can only be told in a video game, and what is so fascinating about it is that it never feels like it's in your face, reminding you that hey, this is a horror game, please be scared. No, it's really subtle. It respects the player's intelligence and it tells a narrative that has a really strong message that will leave you thinking for days. And despite the fact that I went over the entire game in this video, I would still suggest you to check it out. There are many things that I didn't go over, so you could check them on your own. Maybe you can come up with your own theories about the story, because rarely do you get to see such a masterpiece in storytelling, and especially one that takes advantage of the medium as much as your amazing T-Gotchi. But I would like to end this video with my own interpretation of the game. Now, there could be an argument that this game is pessimistic in nature. Like, just think about it, there is no good ending in this game. All endings led to the girl in the green skirt suffering in one way or another. Even the so-called true ending of the game could be considered a bad ending, as pretty much we did not accomplish anything. But I argue that this game does not intend to be overly negative. Instead, T-Gotchi uses this downer tone to criticize escapism. Just take a look at the girl in the green skirt. Her whole character is a walking contradiction. You get subtle things like every time you start a new cycle, her name changes, to more direct contradictions like the fact that she will easily fall in love with the player, even though she knows that this is an impossible romance. And the same can be applied to the other perspective. There is no way that the player can establish a romance with this girl. Throughout the game, we're trying to experiment, to try different options to get that ideal outcome, but we avoid the reality of the situation. And what the game does is pretty much keep our feet back on the ground. And it's that same contradictory nature that makes this game so beautiful. We use certain mediums to distract ourselves from reality. And while it's fine to entertain ourselves from time to time, we should not let this fantasy keep us trapped in a contradictory reality. Thanks a lot for watching the video. I truly did not expect to go this deep into the topic, but I'm glad I did. It was such a fun video to make, and if you enjoy it, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comment section. I would like to see your opinion on any of the games that I discussed. If you'd like to see more content like this, also consider subscribing. And if you want to stay updated on videos and other projects, you can follow me on social media. Once again, thank you for making it this far into the video, and until next time.